Hi, my name is Bandana Tewari, and we are at FDCI Insights 2.0. And our topic today is waste management and reducing consumption post COVID. There is no doubt that through COVID, we've seen the entire supply chain dismantle. I don't have to say much about it because in our panel here, we have exemplary designers from India who have seen what a dysfunctional system can do to especially businesses that are thriving as independent small scale designers and what kind of support they have. But at the same time, I'm very optimistic that because of the nature of the businesses that all of you have on the panel, just the right size to make monumental changes in the way waste is managed in design. And I remember writing a story for one of the newspapers in India, and he talked about from the very beginning, like how do you control waste at a design level? And you're all designers. I want you to keep that in the back of your mind while I am now going to call on, because the idea is that how do you design out waste? The idea that we have to plan knowing what the end cycle involves of a product, right? So, does that come into your purview? Is that something that makes you think about when you are sitting at your creative desk? So this is the discussion that we are going to have, which is about waste. Can we look at it as wealth? Have we ever thought about how waste can turn into wealth? Do you? So I want to start off with Amit Aggarwal, whose journey I have had great pleasure of seeing from day one. And here's a question to you as a designer. Do you think buyers can be offered ensembles with versatility, multifunctionality to make sure that without compromising on style, you're going to use it more, hang on to it more, or because you don't want to put it in a landfill? So, do you keep that in mind?
Bandana, I think it's a very, very valid and a very important question at this particular juncture because also with the history of couture, couture has always been so opulent and grand that it is, I mean, particularly used until now for a single time use. If a bride's picking up something, I think it just gets worn once and I think it just sits in a cupboard for years. But I think over the last 2 years, while I interact with brides or like girls that are about to get married, I always encourage them to pick up a combination of things which can be definitely reutilized. Like it could be, a lot of our work is actually completely done with meticulous hand details, but also it's not really motif driven. So it is a little modern and structural. And I always tell them that if you're just giving you a small example, like if you're picking up an electric blouse, try and pick up an easier skirt to go with it, and try and pick up a drape that can be is a little interactive that you can wear it even with a pair of like a pair of pants or even a pantsuit, so that you are ultimately utilizing components of every single product. And I think that has been a constant language. I also always urge them to understand the multiple uses that a product can have once they invest in us. And I think that is a very, very important conversation because couture is, I never believe that couture is something that you own or wear once and probably, not really use it over and over again.
Yeah, so this is my point. I mean, I completely understand that you're creating clean value that people are going to keep with them for a long time, maybe pass on to their children, and I love that. As designers, this is my biggest question to them: is are you actually designing out waste at your design table? Are you literally looking at a certain fabric and saying, let's say someone wants to throw away, even if it's a couture dress, you want to throw it away. Have you imagined the end life of that product or that design? Have you imagined what the end looks like before you begin to create it.
Of course.
Because
No,
that's
that's
what's
true.
called by design confidence.
No, I feel that you're completely right about that. It really starts at the design stage where, one needs to be really conscious about what you are actually putting down on paper and where is it ultimately after being made and purchased, where is it going to end. And I think that is a very conscious decision that as creative people we need to take responsibility and onus of. And I think that, as you know, a lot of our product is designed out of plastic, which is either recycled or ends up in a landfill. And I think one of the important languages that we cultivate at the brand is the fact that otherwise the plastic would have ended up in a landfill. Doing hours of hand intensive techniques, you are at least increasing the shelf life to a much larger extent. I mean, you don't really end up throwing a couture outfit of couture or something which is meticulously done in at least for the next decade or 2 decades or so. So I think that yes, I completely agree with you here that it's like starting from a single line and being really thoughtful of what is it going to end up into.
Right. I mean, the fact of the matter is, Ellen MacArthur Foundation says that only 1% of whatever's out there is recycled. Only 1% from the entire $1 trillion, industry of fashion, only 1% is recycled. Anyway, going back to our conversation, so Ka-Sha, a lovely brand. Question for you. Now that packaging, everyone talks about packaging, right? In your brand, to be able to control, because that's a huge part of sending off goodies to your clients. In fact, there was a report that was done a few years back before COVID, and it said that we don't go shopping anymore. We don't go shop. We are shopping all the time because we are online, right? So, and that has increased so much that there is excess of almost 40 million containers that go up and down in our oceans to deliver, whether it's a piece of jewelry or your shoes. So don't even talk about the carbon footprint of that kind. But as individual designers, I was wondering, does that make a difference? Is that making your packaging sustainable, moving away from plastic? Does that actually make a huge impact into our whole ethos of sustainability?
So I really believe this word sustainable has been viewed in a very strange way. I really think that for us as a brand, this is how we live, right? This is what we do. So when we're talking about being sustainable, we don't really use that word in any way that we describe ourselves. People keep referring to that to describe us. But I believe that we are just trying to make products, which is anyways waste, right? We're anyways creating stuff. And at the minute we start creating something, we're automatically adding to the waste, whether it is through the pieces of fabric that are left off after production, or even in terms of after I've made a product, what happens to it later, right? So as a brand, we're already adding to that. So I can't even I don't think most of us are 100% sustainable. It's really hard to be that. But what I really want to do is just make products with a lot more consciousness. So we're thinking about things like, one is material, but one is also people. One is also how people are interacting with it. That is the makers of the product as well as the wearers of the product. So if I have to talk about, am I being thoughtful about it from scratch? I feel like this should be deeply ingrained in all of us. I don't think this should be something we need to talk about. We shouldn't have to sell our product because, you know, going on advertising that it's being sustainable. We just need to be this is the way we need to live forward. We need to be thoughtful about it. We need to be conscious about it. And we don't need to keep on, we need to have these conversations, yes, because people have to hear it for sure. But for us, it just comes down to the fact that when I started my label, when I was studying in college, I was very intrigued by Dharavi. I used to land into Bombay all the time. And when I landed in, I would just see plastic all over the rooftops during monsoon. And I started wondering what happens with this material. And that's how I started working with plastic, started working with this whole idea of how can we take a material and just keep trying to repurpose it. And when you talk about how we package, and I think that goes down to every aspect of how we make our product. We have a sister label called Heart to Heart where we upcycle everything. All the packaging that we have is, we don't use plastic at all. We've always maintained that out of chindis come out. So even our packaging bags are made out of that. Labels and tags on the garment, but we hand embroider every tag. So we're only making for what we need. We don't really make multiple amounts of, we don't make multiple pieces and just keep them with us. For me, overstocking is also of not being very sustainable, right? Because then we go into sales and we go into different things that already like then go back and spiral back into the same circle. So I have to put a tag on my garment because I want to tell people the story of my product. So every product has like information about who made it, how many hours it took, because also educating the customer is really, really important. But then can I make the tags out of paper that can then grow back into something? Yes, I can. Why not? So I feel like we can still do these things that are needed to be done. But if we could use materials that could be, which come from recycling or go back into go back into land to grow into something else, I think these are very, very doable things, for brands like ourselves. And that's what I think if
Yeah.
people can start applying those in a more like and not just because you want to be sustainable, but just that's the right way of going forward with the way we're building our brands up or building ourselves up. So we consciously do that, but that's also because it's natural to us, to be very honest.
So this is an interesting segue to the question for Anavila, who's got the most amazing handmade feel touch brand, right? And which is so old school. All the imagery is so old school. All the sentiments about her designs are old school. And now here we are, like doing everything digital. So Anavila, here's my question to you. Do you think being online, being in a virtual world, is perhaps more sustainable than having brick and mortar store, the the inventory that has to be stored in your store, the passage of goods? What do you think? How's it going for you? And has the idea of being virtual and digital and online worked for you or working for you right now?
It's it's a very important question for me because we have just one store, which is in Mumbai, and you see store. Uh, the kind of person I am and the kind of brand I'm constantly trying to create and adapt and shape it up is something which is very tactile, as you rightly said, touch and feel, old school, textiles which you need to look at, feel. But what has happened after I opened the Bombay store and we created that whole environment, which is very natural, very us, minimalistic. The need, to reach our consumers in different cities and also out of India, overseas, was there. But we chose not to open any more stores. So what we've done is for all good purposes, and I feel it was a right decision. Last year, we had started our online presence. We opened up our online store, and once you've created it, obviously is a lot of work. As is the virtual shows we are doing at the fashion weeks now, but putting all of that discipline into your brand and creating a virtual space for the brand has definitely, it's the way forward. It definitely helps us reach out and give that whole experience of the brand to a much larger audience. And in that way, of course, we have to, like you rightly said, that there's a lot of consumption which is happening on the virtual space or is digitally happening online, and there are these cartons which are going everywhere, and the kind of footprint we are creating because of that is something we have to think about. But having said that, to have a small warehouse where you keep your inventory, and when you move it out as and when required overseas, rather than having a brick and mortar and then creating a whole environment, like once again, to feed up that store, is a lot more taxing and pressurizing on the brand as well as on that whole environment. So I feel, and we've really been coping well with it.
Uh,
A consumer who's already experienced our brand knows the textile. It's very easy for them to just come online and make that choice. And for us to be it's a learning for us. So we're constantly learning to adapt to this new way of being able to interact in a better way, help support our consumers in a better way, and we'll take it forward into that direction.
Cool. Yeah, I completely get it. These are such challenging times, and we are all learning on our feet right now. You've got to have your ear to the ground and just run with it because the rules are being broken so fast. and new ones need to be made, but no one really knows where it's heading. You have a brand like 1111. Where's Himanshu? So, which I love. And they haven't been doing anything different now that they haven't done before. So they are not a reactionary brand to COVID. They've always believed in recycling, made by hand, slow fashion, I name it, you name it, right? So, Himanshu, here's a question for you. What do you tell the brands that are starting out? How would you tell them what's the importance of recycling, upcycling, that you cannot be a designer today without having all this in your head, in your heart, and in your mind? Like, it's impossible to be a consumerist designer that is going to pillage from people and the environment. Like, how do you even tell design students coming out now to become designers? Is that important?
I mean, thank you. I mean, everyone. I mean, I'm good to have you on the panel and discussing this thing. We are, as a brand, also, I would say that we're still struggling and working towards it. It is not something easy to do, and it's a learning of last 6-7 years that we've been still trying to improve, and wherever we find mistakes and what can happen and something which we never thought of that we left out, and we need to rework on it. But in last these 6 to 7 years, what I've realized that it is something to be, this is a whole about a design intervention in the practices, and it is about a design education, which is where it will begin from. And this is something I got educated through the process and working in different places and working with different people and realizing things, working in Italy, working in India. And that's when I saw the differences of things, even working within artisans, and even within the artisans, seeing how different artisans have been working, people who respect, people who don't, people who care. So that's where the whole learning happened. And that's where our, eyes, ears, and senses and all were open and grabbing things and trying to fast forward and make it a part of the DNA. And I think it begins from the design education, and that will play the most important role. And then the CEOs of the company, when they implement this as a part of the DNA, and that's when it will start happening. An individual in the company cannot do it. So it will begin from the top end, and then the individual in the company is saying something, then it would kind of impact it more. The design education is something I'll go back to. It is, if as the child, been taught that you never leave food in your plate, and how even in certain cultures, in Japan, it is something very well respected, and in even our culture it has been. And then how something like that has been done, that recycling, upcycling, biodegradable qualities, this should become a basic hygiene of the design practices. And if this has been taught, then only things will start happening. And it is not easy. I mean, even today, if you go and look for things, it is going to be difficult, because there are not many manufacturers in the country who will support your requirement. And this is because there is no demand of it also in the thing. So if a consortium of brands and designers are demanding it, then the manufacturers will even invest into it to give you that kind of supplies of things, like we were talking about packaging, anything. There is an example when we started a brand called Cora 6 years back, and the idea was to make it made to order and being in an online. And then that also we said that wherever we can imply a sustainable way of how we can consciously work on the design, we wanted to use 100% organic cotton thread to stitch. And denim industry, they only use a polyester thread because it goes through heavy washing, and cotton threads cannot even withstand that. And we were looking at an organic cotton thread, and there wasn't any supplier in the country who was giving it. Coats India said that they do, but only in China, because China has a demand of it. India never ever asked for it. We are the first one ever questioned. And then there was one vendor we found out, and he managed to give us, he had in his portfolio, but nobody ever sourced it. So it was difficult, and like today, even if you look for recycled polyester zippers, I mean, just to look for that zippers, and it's not available. So because people are not demanding, and these are small things.
I was just thinking that, it's unfortunate because we do come from a country where recycling was something that was a norm, right? We had the whole philosophy of jugaad. I mean, we don't need to say who throws away a sari. We never grew up throwing away things. And we always forget that we are living in a society where we've forgotten that everything we throw away, there's actually no away. It's being thrown somewhere, whether it's a toothpaste or a lighter or whatever, it has to go somewhere. There's no away in it. So I think one of the reasons why people haven't looked at waste differently is because they don't see the economic proposition of turning waste to wealth, right? The fact that you're looking for recycled zippers, the fact that as if there's not enough of it being thrown away. Clearly there are, but you're not getting it because it has not been repurposed to be sold in the market. So it's a chicken and egg story because we talk about supply and demand, and I think consumers need to be absolutely engaged with this. But the good thing is, research after research shows that millennials are much more engaged with the ideas of sustainability and accountability. Let's see. I mean, this is a conversation that has been so far.
Sorry, I just wanted to add one thing is that it is um, even this whole recycling is also something, you're right, that that whole repurpose thing has been there as a culture. But even when a bigger corporates which are trying to do that, where it requires a huge innovations to recycle or repurpose something out and eventually reuse it into a product that might be using a 10% or 20% of that recycle thing, because it goes through such a high nomenclature that it has to pass through certain quality tests, which cannot use 100% of that recycled yarn, and these nomenclatures are actually going to destroy more, because these quality checks are for high usages and high washing standards and various things, and which needs to be relooked at into the entire policies, even at the quality standard level in all these companies. Then it would be even making sense. Otherwise it is like mini school is what we are using.
But this is why brands like yours, and in fact everyone sitting in this panel, it's a manageable size. So, I talk about this a lot, the idea that bigger is better. It becomes a fallacy, and COVID has shown us that. Because how do you manage? Think about fashion companies. How are you going to even correct systems when you've got a Zara shop opening every day in some part of the world? At least before COVID, that was what's happening, right? So the systemic changes that they have to make is mind-boggling. I don't even know where they're going to start. So with brands like yours, and here's a question to all of you, and we can take it one by one. We will start off with Anavila. So what do we do with fast fashion? Do we have an idea about what is it that can counter fast fashion, in your opinion?
As you rightly said, Bandana, just now, that it's taken a system, which has created fast fashion, has taken a long time, and it's a huge business. There are, huge rates who are working and pushing and establishing this lifestyle. So it's it has to be dealt at a consumer perception and thought level, where, as you rightly said, that more and more research is showing that millennials are more conscious of how they consume, what they consume. My son, who's 14 years old, is thinking. He's not running after, and for designers like us, all of us sitting here, and I've seen you doing those parties, and at your island, where you're exchanging clothes and you're using, reusing, all of that, and how long is the life cycle of that one particular product. You did my interview in 2014, where there was this zari sari which we made with linen in Mohenjo-daro collection, which had this sheen. And there has been 6 years since 2014, and we're still producing that sari because we created that sari with the thought of longevity, and that it should find place in a wardrobe. It's a classic and should not go out of fashion. And a person can repurpose, reuse that sari, changing the doing a certain kind of styling. So I think a more and more mindful creation can lead to more. I firmly believe mindful creation can lead to mindful consumption. Having said that, as you rightly said, we are smaller brands. We can control a lot of what we create, what we do, and also our interaction with the consumers, educating them, telling them, creating that story. Taking them through the whole life cycle of the product, how it is created. At the bigger level, there are challenges which at policy level, at a larger scale level. How do you change that whole mindset, which is brought us to this whole fast consuming and creating desire for something which will go in 5 days, 6 days. It is out of fashion because digitally we are promoting something new every day. So we have taken a conscious call that we are re-looking at our classics, re-proposing to our customers. They have that, I'm wearing this sari from Folk, which is also a 2014 sari, which we presented at, the FDCI show. And, you just did this corded blouse, which is knitted, and the whole styling of the sari and the look and approach has changed. So, we are not trying to put something new on our Instagram or, talk about something new to the consumer every day. Because somewhere when we try to do that, you're creating desire for a new product, and you're pushing somebody to buy something new and not look at their wardrobe where they already have something created with love and value and a beautiful textile which can be used again and again and again.
Yeah, I mean it's really tough at this time because of social media. We are all custodians of our own brands. We don't even need a magazine anymore, right? Because if you are prolific with your social media and Facebook and Instagram or whatever, you are the one who is a publisher, designer, creator, all you designers. So in light of that, I find it fascinating because the filters, there are less and less filters now. So there are less and less checkpoints. So the onus is now more and more on designers to be more mindful and teach consumers that you don't need to buy that much. Yes, we need to buy because we love buying good things, but buy things of value. And so, let's go to Amit. And so I want to ask Amit the same question that I asked Anavila, which is like, how do we as a collective of young designers who are really good at what they do, how do you counter fast fashion? Because now we're not going to be in that seasonal trend anymore. You're not going to be working on 6 shows, hopefully, because that's too much. And what do you think? How do we counter as exemplary, young, small businesses and small? No, I'm not calling you guys small, but I'm just saying it's a compact business. It's not a conglomerate. What do you think?
I think, Bandana, the most important thing that um, the pandemic or probably the slowdown brought to my life was that time to retrospect that there was so much excess left with the processes that the company had been doing over the years, that this was the time to actually start and reutilize it. I think a lot started with almost like a collage artist, where I did not actually create anything new, but whatever was left over was still beautiful, was still wonderful, and how could we reuse it? So that I think it, of course, had to start small and from within, and consciously over the last 6 months, we haven't made a big collection. Like, as designers who, I mean, as a brand, we are continuously doing runway shows, and that's one way that I actually find the brand being alive and all of that. But I felt that this was the time where I actually started concentrating on much smaller capsules, which have really brought my own life to a certain sense of beauty. Because I think I've started enjoying the little details that could have come, like just like what Anavila said. We started re-looking at our classics instead of probably trying and experimenting with a newer product, because when we design a range of suppose 50 pieces, half of those pieces definitely, no matter how beautiful they are pieces without much of a purpose. People will choose something over those products. And what happens to a product like that? So I think a lot of work started with collaging. And I think we then started creating newer collections based exactly on what we already had. So the last 6 months have been really exciting for us because it has been a more introspective journey towards understanding the resources that we already have and not to really add. I mean, and when you talk about fast fashion, I think that I really feel that brands, I mean, a lot of high street brands really also need to relook at what they are creating. Like, I mean, I'm just giving you Zara's example. I would love a brand like Zara to actually be just, vintage pieces. I mean, they have so many resources. It could be a stunning collectible. Like each piece at Zara could be a sports jacket. I mean, even if you go to a place like Sarojini or the Kabutar market that we have in Delhi, there are so many beautiful products that I'd love to buy immediately. It's just that sometimes it's not possible for a regular consumer to go to these places and pick it up. But why doesn't like 5 Zara stores think of a concept like that? I mean, I'm sure that a million people would like to pick up something that's still unique. It's still at a price that a Zara consumer picks up a product like that for. And I think that could be a big solution. I mean, I don't know whether you've ever been to the Kapoor market, it has got the most stunning pieces that anyone would love to have.
Right. But here's my point. The idea that you can pick up something, let's say, you took Zara as an example, but I wish they would make clothes that, there's some good stuff that you want to keep. The fact is, it's a dysfunctional system because, first of all, how are we paying $5 for a pair of pants? Somewhere along the line, someone is paying the cost, right? So it's not about clothes that we don't like. I love lots of stuff that came out of Zara, and I want to buy them. But the fact that it's so cheap and the fact that we are addicted to the idea of novelty is fueled by companies like this that are putting out new merchandise every week. So it is dysfunctional from day one. The ethos is about greed. It's Black Friday every day, basically.
True.
And so I think it's a systemic problem. It's not about that sometimes you find the stuff, you go to Zara and you're like, wow, I could have this for a long time and it cost me little. But I find this very fascinating. How do we talk to consumers? So here's my question, Himanshu. So you've been doing this for a while, right? Before COVID, you were doing this sort of slow fashion, behind the scenes, get to know us through the process, not just through the product ideology. What do you see amongst your consumers, your particular tribe, so to speak, who come to you again and again? What's so different? What makes them so different from the person who'll run to Zara every time the fashion window, the window changes with the clothing, the window dressing rather changes? What makes them different? Are they ideologically different? Are they more environmentally friendly? What is it?
I think in this case, I mean the consumer is completely different because one is the even the price segment, right? Because the segment is completely North Pole and South Pole, so we cannot be we can't compare them in that way, because even somebody going to Zara would love to take buy something from us, and they might wait to we go on sale or something and do it, and they cannot afford to do it, and which is something even we would feel bad that we want to. It's not that I would like to make things expensive. It's just that the product reaching to these cost prices, and even in this cost prices, honestly, we are not able to pay enough to the artisan. So even if I try to even make it better, the cost price even goes more up. So these two segments, I won't be able to compare it. It is they are going there because they're getting something they can afford in that price point. So I would put it in that way. But I would say another way that a collaboration for a brand like a mass market brand to collaborate with the brands who have been practicing things, practicing things, looking at 360 degree of design practices, and do a collections with them where certain aspect can come into it, rather than collaborating with just the names who bring you the attractions in terms of visibility, but rather even collaborate with the names who can bring in something more into the DNA structure, and build a line with them, and come with it, because these guys are already big enough to spread the word. But what they don't have is the product which can bring more sensibility at a certain price point. I would take this as a challenge, because fast fashion is, you cannot eradicate. I'm sorry, it is impossible, because there is a huge amount of different tiers of people who cannot afford things what we would do. So how can we do something which is so design sensitive, even has a certain aspect of the indigenous practices, or certain so-called, sustainable practices or whatever? So we build that product line, and which can bring part of it. I
Right.
would actually look at it in that way.
But this is the thing, that if you look at the SDGs and what we're committed to through the United Nations in terms of environmental health and the contribution of fashion in the way it's degrading the environment, we don't have a choice. We don't have a choice. We cannot say that fast fashion will survive forever, because we have tiers and tiers and tiers of classes that we need. They're literally moving up the social ladder, the aspirational ladder, whatever you call it. But we don't have that kind of time left now to see that as, I may have become conscious of my choices, but I can't expect someone, living on the street to make those choices. I just feel that the onus is not on people who have money or don't have money. The onus is on designers and corporates who are running businesses to change their practices, right? Because, again, as I said, this is a massive topic. So I'm not going to delve too much into the contradiction, but here's a question to Karishma. Do you feel that this comparison is actually quite excessive? Because you guys, as designers, get pulled up for being negligent, for instance, because people confuse what fast fashion is doing as opposed to what you designers are doing. When I say you, as a collective, young designers anywhere in the world who are conducting their own business with a certain level of mindfulness. I know that you said you don't like to use the word sustainability, which I completely understand. So let's say designers who are working responsibly, because you get clubbed into the fast fashion world because it's just a world of consumption. Do you feel
all the time. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
So, like, for example, like, people will come and say, but this is cotton, I can get the same thing in cotton. Yes, you can. Yes, of course you can. You can get the same thing in cotton, but how is it made? Is it going to last you more than like 3 washes? Who's making it for you? Like, you don't know anything about that product. I think, we end up getting so caught up in the design of the product, we forget that our job as designers is also to design the entire system that focuses around that product, right? So from start to finish. And I think, like, when it comes to like system design, like, how do you ensure that, yes, the product needs to be great, but how are you deciding everything else that falls within it? So I think with a place like Zara, since we've been bringing it up a lot, we need to try and reconfigure the way that their system functions and not their end product, because honestly the end product is not bad. I mean, if they can produce that kind of stuff at that kind of quality and just be able to make a few changes in the way that they're paying people and how many pieces they're making, I think that can make a huge difference in the way they function. We don't need Zara to shut down necessarily. We just need them to be more conscious of how they're building that system around them. So that's what I think. And I think it happens all the time because people do have access to, like, also now with online retail. Every single person who's retailing online goes on these insane sales. So Amazon has clothing at crazy prices, and then people expect that from us. And we're like, but Himanshu rightfully said, like, we charge a certain amount because we got to, me as a brand, we constantly say, let's do a line of basics. Let's do basics because I like wearing them too. I like wearing basics, and most of the toiles I make become my basics, but eventually I can't compete with the price points that the bigger fast fashion are selling the basics at. So at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense to the consumer either, because um, I mean, they will buy a certain amount of products, but they will not come to you entirely there for the basic clothes that they need. So I think if anyone does have the power to make a huge change, it is these big guys. No matter what we say to them, when H&M started a conscious line and they started talking about bring product back and we'll give you a product in return, people were listening. What do with it, and that became very controversial, like what they're doing with it. But at the end of the day, when an H&M says it, a million people hear it. When we say it, maybe just those couple of thousand people who really believe do say it. And I really do think that there is one part of our consumer who comes because they love the story, but there is one part of the consumer that's coming because they love the product, right? So we just build products that are beautiful looking, and then you say, oh, by the way, hey, this is also a mindful product. I think that's when we all start doing our job like really, really well. That's what I think. So I feel like we do come under a huge amount of scanners because of what's available, but like I guess that's a part of the game.
Can I just add one quickly?
Himanshu, I'm just thinking of what you said. Yeah. Of course you can add, but I was just thinking about what you just said previously, which is like, it would be wonderful if big fast fashion companies harnessed the younger designers for a much more fruitful, collaborative, co-creating collections, right? Within the countries that they operate in, working with local designers and well-known local designers who are not fast fashion brands, but they have the entire system in place that they could harness. But I don't think they've done that. I mean, they've relied on big brands to do capsule collections that, in fact, increases greed, because people are lining up for a small collection that is a drop, and they're lining up for 3 days beforehand to pick it up. So I think it defeats the purpose. So, yes, Himanshu, what were you going to say?
Yeah, one was I was wanted to change that to more than younger designer. I would say at least some designer practices who are minimum 10 years, because then they bring that value to it, because it's actually the younger ones coming in and they will bring in some very interesting new experiments, but certain aspect kind of falls out in this system following up. So yeah, I would say at least certain experience which will kind of help in that. But what I wanted to add here is the policies. When the policies kind of come in, and that's when these fast fashion brands will do. Example of an IKEA, when they kind of came in India and started it, the policy was that there is a minimum percentage they have to produce within India. And they've been given a time span of whatever, 5 years, 6 years, or 7 years, I don't know, where they have to achieve that, because it was difficult for them to achieve that 30% or whatever, 40% of minimum production done in India, because there were no kind of systems like that they can go and work. And now they are working backwards to try to do that, and trying to even work with some of the clusters around in Bihar and everywhere, in Kashmir and in Rajasthan, and trying to do things, and where these price point where they're getting a livelihood, consistency, and then how can you bring their livelihood a little bit up would be the second question, and bring in that value design thing. Of course, these are a group of international designers who would kind of bring in those products, work with them, and that is what is required. I mean, otherwise it is not going to kind of change things. So these policies will do a lot of.
I completely understand. And on that note, before I wrap up, I just wanted to say that you guys are really at the forefront of ushering change, because you can be the examples that people will follow, whether they're consumers or upcoming designers. Because I think all of you at the heart of it have a certain philosophy that sort of respects the process, it respects the people, it respects the purpose before the product. Product is, of course, going to be beautiful because you've put all those systems in place of thinking about the people who make them, how slow or how good or how ethical the process is. And also, I know that a lot of you have a sense of purpose to why you design. So I think I would never underestimate what you bring to the table and what you can teach massive brands, massive fast fashion brands. And I hope that they can look into your beautiful practices. I would not say sustainable practices, because sustainability is a journey, and we are all doing incremental changes, right? So I really hope that you guys become shining example, as you well deserve. And on that note, I have to say goodbye because our time is up. Thank you for being here on this session.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Bandana.
much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you,
Good
everyone.
to see everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.